Unfortunately, the three of us have to ride with our hoods up while we are in transit to school and at school because the lines we take on the train don't go there, and we are going in unless we are doing an activity in our school that involves our favorite color. My parents have to ride the L with their hoods up too. My mom works the hospital on Paulina, which is also on the brown line, where she rides with me sometimes, honestly, when her favorite color is purple. And my dad's favorite color is blue when he has to ride the orange line to 35th and Orchard. Meanwhile, back to my life during kindergarten, on New Year's Day of that year, which was my 6th birthday, my parents told me they were going to have another baby. Oddly enough, when the last day of school, which was June 1st, 2006, came about, and I was at the Kimball station to ride the Brown line back to Robbinsog, my Aunt Catherine, who was one of my mom's sisters, said my mom was in labor and that she was going to spend some time with me while my brother was going to be born. I think all we did was go to a McDonald's around Kimball for ice cream, while when I was done, we got the call that my brother, Samuel Arnold Robbins, was born. I was jumping for joy on that whole ride to Harold Washington Library, Stan Van Buren, which is why it was hard for me as we were approaching Fullerton. Our train experienced a delay. When we got off, I pretty much ran from the station and into my building and beat my aunt into the elevator, got off at the 7th floor and went into Robbinsog. My mom was asleep, and my dad was holding my little brother. And at the time, my mom was 34, and my dad turned 27 just a few days prior because it was my parents' anniversary just a few days prior. Like last time, my Aunt Heather was my mom's midwife again, and my Aunt Diane was flying in from Seattle, where she lived the next day, to meet Sam the next day. After my dad held him for an hour or so, I held him for a little bit with a little help from other people because I have difficulty holding babies due to my fine motor issues. And that's also brought on by my autism. The next day, everyone except my grandparents in Florida met and held my younger brother Sam. They didn't meet him until we went to Orlando for winter break 6 months later for my first winter break in 1st grade. Overall, the next few years, Sam really grew into becoming my best friend, because I didn't bother trying to make new friends at school. To this day, we all super close. Really all three of us share a bedroom, where we share the same interests in music and TV shows and movies, and at the time, toys. Everything I went through in my first year of life, Sam went through in his first year of life too. He got tested and he had autism, and my parents sent him to a behavioral torture school on Polk Street. They figured out the favorite color was orange and baptized and cloaked him orange. I was living life normally until about 2 months after my mom's 39th birthday, when my mom told us she was about 2 months pregnant and that she was going to have another baby due 2 months into my 6th grade year, which was the first of my 3 years in middle school. Let me start off by saying that middle school was a lot harder for me than elementary school was because the structure was different now, and I began switching classes. Instead of having one teacher the whole day, along with stricter rules and teachers. So when my baby brother was being born at a difficult time for me, that was when I knew it was going to be hard too. My brother George Zachary Robbins was born on October 9th, 2011, when my mom was 39 and my dad was 32. As hard as middle school was for me after my baby brother George was born, there were 3 changes in my mother that were for the worst after that. That were, 1, my mother was not as happy as she used to be. 2, my mother was beginning to have mobility issues, and at about the time I got to high school, she began using a cane, and she was just 42 at the time. 3, some of the symptoms of her autism began to show more. However, back to George, we weren't as close to him as me and Sam weren't as close to as we are with each other. Sam just never clicked with George because George's main interest is ceiling fans and Sam's is roads, and they never really have been on the same page interest-wise, and I never clicked with George because he doesn't know this, because of how my mother changed after his birth and how it impacted her helping me through middle and high school. However, when it comes to George as a person, he is a lot different than me and my brother. He personally reminds me of my parents, more than he does me and my brothers. I feel that way because he is a lot more hyper, just like both of my parents, and he actually reminds me more of my dad than my mom because for some reason he still cuddles with my mom and specifically not my father every night. I don't think he is sexually attracted to her or anything. She probably is just more of a softer cuddler than my dad is, but even if he is sexually attracted to her, so what? All boys at one point in their life go through a phase where they have a crush on their mother. I just find it interesting because when my parents told me that I needed to go to my bedroom to sleep, that was when I stopped cuddling with my parents. He still does it. It's just he walks over to our room to sleep when he is done. Just a quick side note, I and Sam personally don't remind ourselves of either of our parents. We only remind ourselves of ourselves. Now, back to how my mom has changed. When it comes to how I said my mom seemed a lot less happy, I think, but I will never ask, that after George was born, she suffered from postpartum depression. The reason I will never ask was that before she got her cane, I asked if she knew about her mobility issues, and she screamed at me to go to my room. I didn't bother to leave my room that day, and she never apologized, and my dad never had a talk with me, saying that what I did was wrong. I think he just wanted me to assume that it was. I did express my feelings about this to Sam when George was not around because I didn't want to hurt George's feelings. One of the best ways I express my concerns as an autistic guy, and for some neurotypicals, is if I do it by talking to someone. Unfortunately, my mom is not that person. My dad would be that person, except he wants me to stand up for myself now that I am 17 years old, so he wants me to be out of my personal problems, that George is a little too young to understand. So I talk about my personal problems with Sam, and he talks about his personal problems with me. When it comes to my family-wide issues and us getting angry at the United States, we do express it differently among each of us in our family. We actually are very active in the United States as a family. As I have previously stated, we learn and work in the United States, and every so often we do some volunteer work in the United States. We go in for medical needs, we also go in for luxury, we also pay taxes to the United States government. Since in Robbinsog we have no taxes, since my parents paid the condo off, and my parents and soon I vote in United States elections. Side note, yes, we do hate Donald Trump, the current president of the United States. Despite how religious we are in America's eyes, we're politically staunch Democrats. My mother cried like a baby when Trump won. However, back to the topic of us talking about family-wide issues, we do talk about them at the table at dinner at night. We also talk about our day too. We also play a game called Roses and Thorns, which was a game invented by the former First Lady of the United States, well, really the first family, which are my parents' heroes, the Obamas, where they have to name one good rose and one bad for one thing that happened in their day. Back onto the subject of my mom being depressed. My parents still have the healthiest marriage on the planet. It is not my dad is upsetting my mother. In fact, my bed is literally right next to the wall there that's shared between my room and my parents' room. Every night I can hear them coo at each other and ruckus in there, and that sounds like they're making out in there, so I know their marriage is healthy, and super glue is easier to separate than my parents. Also, just because my mom is unhappy, that does not mean she is not unhappy all the time. Every Friday night, we gather up in our parents' bedroom to watch a Disney movie. We also are a very happy family. We're joggers and swimmers, and we go to the workout room or the pool at our building at least 3 times a week. Also, like I said, since she is the high priestess, she chooses where heaven is, and to her, heaven is being around her family. We are around her a lot whenever all 5 of us are in the same room, and she is all smiles. That means when we die, we will be hanging around her, and she will be smiling forever. My dad really only gets unhappy when he sees that one of us is unhappy. But he gets even more unhappy when my mom is unhappy, because I know that he loves his wife more than he loves his kids, who he had with his wife. Because of that, I definitely see my dad upset more, because I can tell that whenever my mom is moody and doesn't want me or my brothers in her room, which happens about 3 random non-consecutive days a month lately. My dad always leaves her room with at the very least tears in his eyes, but I am going to say that at least once a month he comes out of his room crying like a baby. My guess is that my mom is depressed because she has been having mobility issues. I brought up earlier that she has a cane now, and she doesn't use it every day. In fact, she doesn't even use it every week. She probably uses it once a day at random, a month, and that is unparalleled to when she's depressed. There is no pattern. Last April she used it on the 8th, and this May she used it on the 14th. I can tell this is not because of randomness. I know my mom is having mobility issues because she once signed a permission slip for me at school, and her handwriting was totally different than before. What I mean by different is, it was sloppy when it was well before my brother George was birthed. I do have a feeling something happened when my brother George was born that made her this way. I once asked her when she got the cane, and she answered, no, very gently. I then turned away, and then, to head back to my room, she literally kicked me in the ass. That is wildly out of character for my mother. She is usually a kind and loving and very humorous woman. Never would I think she would spank me like that. She then told me that if I ever try to investigate to prove her wrong, my ballsack is next. I wasn't crying or anything because I have a high tolerance to pain, but it wasn't until that point where I felt something was seriously wrong with my mother that I've been telling Sam something was wrong with my mother, because I was upset with her new personality, and after she gave birth to George. Before, I was just telling Sam because I was upset that this time I was telling Sam out of concern. I didn't talk about any of this in front of George because I didn't want to upset him, and my mom was the center of his universe. I also didn't want to tell my dad about this because I knew he would learn about it from my mom and take her side about what she said.